Hi everybody, I hope you're all doing well. This is Mariano Henestrosa with the 2020 CASA program with Brooklyn Arts Council, and today we are going to be working with texture because, besides drawing, besides color, besides composition, texture is another element that we can use to make art. And today we're going to be looking at the work of a German painter called Anselm Kiefer, who is known for his really monumental landscapes that have incredibly thick texture. And I think his work is a great example that will serve us to explore how we can use texture when making a painting. Let's look at the materials, and then we'll also look at the painting itself before we get started. There. And there's a lot of texture. So let's see what materials we're going to need to use, and let's see how to make this texture happen. So our supplies today are going to be a wood panel, brushes, a palette, acrylic paint. We're going to use a texture gel with pumice stone in this case, some palette knives to apply the gel, paper towel, water. Okay, let's see how we do this. So when we look at the painting, we see that it's got like a dark / dirty blue background, and then we have all the stems of the flowers and like the flowers. We're gonna start with the background. So I'm gonna start by mixing my colors. In this case I'm gonna use blue, use some white, a little bit of brown to make it a bit dirty. Okay, I think this will be our starting color. And I'm going to use water, quite a lot of it, just so that it's very thin, and that will help us achieve a velvety texture, kind of similar to the one that we see in the background. And I'm just going to cover pretty much the whole panel. Oh, moved. This bottom part doesn't really matter as much because we're going to cover it later on. And now I'm going to do a second pass. I'm making a little bit, my color a little bit dirtier, and I'm going to add even like a tiny little bit of black. And we're going to do a second pass. See how that I'm only gonna do this on the top half, which is the part of the sky that we more or less see. See how that starts to have like that, the darker element? And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in and over these brushstrokes only with water. And I'll explain you why. By going back, you know, just with water, that is going to make some of the paint that I put down lift. And once it's lifted, okay, giving it a few seconds, I'm going to dry my brush, and I'm going to go over again. And well, I don't know if you can see very well, but as I go over, some of that paint gets lifted, right? And we can start to see the texture of the wood. One of the reasons I chose to use a wood panel is precisely that, because, well, on one hand, we're going to be working with heavy textures, and like paper might have a hard time holding that. So a wood panel is like a better surface because it's more solid, obviously, and it's thicker. But the other reason is, since we're going to be working with texture, why not also use the very texture of the surface we're going to work on? And in this case, well, wood always has like beautiful patterns and texture, so I wanted to incorporate that to our painting. Okay, so that will be our background. Now that we have our background, I'm just very, very schematically going to mark with a pencil the area where we're going to be making the texture. So this is more or less just where the stems are going to be, right? It's like this kind of bottom half. And I'm going to more or less also draw where the flowers will be. Now this is hard. This is probably hard to see, but it's only really to like have a little reference. It doesn't even matter, you know. It doesn't even matter if we get all of the flowers in. And now I'm going to start applying the texture. So, getting the gel. As you can see, it looks a little bit kind of like cement. And just throwing it on there. It's almost like putting butter on toast. Okay. So this will be what we're going to be working with, and what I'm going to do next is to do the stems. I'm going to use the side of the knife. And draw. And if there's, sometimes there'll be little excesses, I can use that to make my little flowers. So I'm starting to have a collection of flowers up here, as you can see. It still doesn't look like much, but we'll get there. Realizing also that in some places I have a little bit too much, so I can always skim it off and then go over again. I skim the whole thing actually. Okay, let's start again. Okay, so I'm starting again. I took away a lot of it. And now I'm going back in. Can always skim again. If we do it, if we don't like how they came out, we can always just make it flat and redo. It might look a little bit messy right now, but it will become a little bit clearer once we start adding color. Okay, now I'm going to add a little bit, some more flowers, because there's some flowers that are on top of the stems. So I'm going to make a thicker part over there in a couple spots. Right? There you go. They almost look like clouds, which is good because they kind of look like clouds in the painting as well. Okay, do a couple more flowers and then we're going to let it dry. So in some spots, I'm trying to connect this part with the flowers. So I'm just using the edge of the knife and kind of putting it flat against the surface so that there's just a little bit of the gel will go in there. You see? That way it'll be connected. Okay, and the other thing that I'm going to do is, if we look at those little red flowers over there, those are also elevated textures. So I'm going to put little spots here and there as well, so that it can be my colored flowers. Okay, now we're going to let it dry. Okay, so now that it's dry, we're going to do a wash with dark color. Why are we doing this? Well, so the way the texture works basically is it makes surface uneven. That means that there are parts that are higher, there are parts that are lower, and we're going to use that to our advantage. First, we're going to paint with a dark color over the whole surface, and then we will paint with a light color or lighter colors over the same surface, but we will do it in such a way, we will use a texture to our advantage, making it so that the paint only sticks to the parts that are higher. If this sounds a little bit difficult to understand, I think it will become clearer as we go along. So I'm taking my dark color and just adding quite a bit of water because I want it to be very, 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 very liquid. Actually, let's use a bigger brush. And I'm trying to get the paint to go everywhere. Making sure that it goes between the gaps. You see how like it tends to like stick to the parts that are higher? That's what we'll do later with the lighter colors. And for now we're just gonna cover, go, cover the whole thing. You could really do this with other colors. We're doing dark here because that's the color, well, that's the palette that we have in the painting that we are copying, you know. Anselm Kiefer likes to use pretty dark colors, and that's part of like what makes his paintings like so powerful. There's that element of contrast that just works very well in his paintings. Try and get everything. And now, well, let's do one more pass through the whole sky, right, to make it a little bit more even. And now that we've made it more or less even, I'm going to do the same thing I did before, which is go over just with water. Try and remove some of that dark color, only for the sky. Right? You can also use our paper towel. Okay, so now that we have more or less a darkish cover, go in with like lighter colors. So I let my paint dry and I thought it was a little bit light still, so I did yet another color, another layer, with the dark color, and now I'm going to start working with the lighter colors. So I'm going to start with the flowers first. And we're just gonna go for it. Start. We're gonna go over. And we don't even have to. We can even use the color of the texture to our advantage. See, we don't necessarily have to paint the whole thing. Like the texture itself is a little bit gray, so we can use that. To create part of the shadows. Slowly but surely, we'll get there. So I'm just gonna go on. I'm gonna do all my white flowers. And you see how that's what I meant when I said before about using the texture to our advantage. You know, the paint will only cling onto the higher parts of the surface. So like all the little holes and so on will continue to be dark. And it creates a very, very cool effect. See, our flowers are starting to like come out. And the texture actually, you know, it gives them more relief, but the combination of the texture and using the paint on top of that texture makes that volume be even like more apparent. It like heightens it. Okay, so those are my white flowers. Now, let's go on with the stems. When we look at the stems, similar to the flowers, it's a combination of lights and darks right next to each other, so we're gonna try and replicate that over here. So first I made like a greenish gray, just a little bit of yellow, a little bit of black, and a little bit of white. And this will be like my first layer. And I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm just gonna kind of go over. In this case, I'm going to try, rather than just cover the whole thing, I'm going to try and follow the directions of the stems. Even if they don't necessarily exactly match the ones that we drew with the palette knife. Can you see how we're starting to have like that overlap of like the light with the paint and the dark? So we're gonna keep going and just cover the whole surface of our stems. I'm going to keep using the lighter color going over the stems. I'm gonna try and like not use it all over the place. Use it in certain sections so that it doesn't, that way it will still help create the effect of stems that are closer and then others that are further away. So after this first layer with light color, I'm gonna go in areas where I didn't quite use the light color, and I'm using a darker color this time. So it's gonna be I made this brown tone. I used some raw umber, some yellow, and a tiny little bit of red. This is so we can have like a little bit of variety. You know, that way it's not just, it doesn't all look the same. And I'm gonna go with an even darker color. And you can always switch, you know. You can do dark, light, dark. You can do as you wish. The next thing I'm going to do is add a touch of color. It's going to be a little bit of orange. For a series of flowers that are in the foreground. See, so now we have a series of like warm toned flowers in the front. We have our light white flowers further back. That creates an extra level. So we have flower, stem, flower, sky. It helps enhance the effect of depth in the painting. Just in the same way that like these few broken stems that are here and there kind of break the monotony. And as you might have noticed, you know, we have the stems over here and we have the flowers up here, but like they're not connected, right? So I'm going to do that part next. Connect the stems to the flowers. I'm going to use my raw umber. I'm just going to do probably go over parts of this with black as well, because that's the color that the artist likes to use to highlight a lot of his things, a lot of the objects in his paintings. So we're going to use that too. And highlight a few more stems here and there. Okay, so we're starting to get there. It's starting to look like a dense flower bush, similar to the one in the painting. well, like I said, the next thing will be to go back in with some black. You might think that it's kind of a dark painting, and I would have to agree with you. There's definitely artists that are much more colorful than Kiefer, but at the end of the day, the thing is, we can achieve whatever we want to achieve expressively by many different means. One of the main tools that we have is contrast, right? And that can be done through color as well as through tone. So like some artists are very, very colorful, and like that's how they choose to create their contrasting effects, by using colors that are, well, very different to each other, like we saw with Matisse, right? He uses all sorts of like really bright colors and just like throws them together. This is another way. In his case, Kiefer is not so much of a colorist. It's not that he doesn't use color, but his color is way more subdued. And it's mostly through these contrasts between both the texture, in the sense of like parts that are flat and parts that are textured, and also the tone, which we could bring down to like its most elemental, which would be between what dark and light. In this case, we have the flowers and like, this our dark bush with like little glimpses of light, and sometimes little touches of color. I just like to show you in this workshop that there's like all these different ways, and then at the end of the day, we all get to choose whichever ones we want. So one thing that Kiefer likes to do here in this painting is he's got a lot of little touches of black, right? Here and there, just like a lot of it is like at the base of those flowers. And it really makes the highlight part of the texture stick out, because you have you have the contrast between the light and the dark, but then also it goes even a step further because you have the texture. So it's raised, but with the little bit of black on the edge, it looks like it's even more so. It's part of the magic that like Kiefer brings into his paintings. It's like you could say that it's even like a little bit of trickery, like a trompe l'oeil. Hi everybody, I hope you're all doing well. This is Mariano Henestrosa with the 2020 CASA program with Brooklyn Arts Council, and today we are going to be working with texture, because besides drawing, besides color, besides composition, texture is another element that we can use to make art. And today we're going to be looking at the work of a German painter called Anselm Kiefer, who is known for his really monumental landscapes that have incredibly thick texture. And I think his work is a great example that will serve us to explore how we can use texture when making a painting. Let's look at the materials, and then we'll also look at the painting itself before we get started. So here we have it. We've used texture to create our stems and our flowers, and also we've used the texture from the wooden panel to work against that for the sky. I hope you enjoyed it and that you decided to try it out at home. So here we have it. We've used texture to create our stems and our flowers, and also we've used the texture from the wooden panel to work against that for the sky. I hope you enjoyed it and that you decided to try it out at home. So here we have it. We've used texture to create our stems and our flowers, and also we've used the texture from the wooden panel to work against that for the sky. I hope you enjoyed it and that you decided to try it out at home. So here we have it. We've used texture to create our stems and our flowers, and also we've used the texture from the wooden panel to work against that for the sky. I hope you enjoyed it and that you decided to try it out at home. So here we have it. We've used texture to create our stems and our flowers, and also we've used the texture from the wooden panel to work against that for the sky. I hope you enjoyed it and that you decided to try it out at home. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and make some art at home. I'll see you next week.